Welcome to the Workology podcast, where we discuss the science and art of the workplace, gain powerful insights, resources, and perspectives on the industries of human resources and recruiting. Join your host, Jessica Miller-Merrill, chief blogger of bloggingforjobs.com, for an in-depth and no-holds-barred look into the future of our most powerful business asset, the employee. And now, welcome your host, Jessica, with this podcast episode of Workology.
Welcome to the Workology podcast. Thank you for making us part of your week. Today's topic is how to use mobile to enhance your employee development. And we're here talking with Barney, an organizational psychologist and HR tech innovator who has a new mobile development product called LeaderAmp that serves as a leadership coach on the fly, if you will. It complements individual and group coaching, and I'm excited to talk all about it. Matt, welcome to the Workology podcast.
Great to be with you.
Let's talk about what an organizational psychologist is. Tell us about your background and how you got here.
Sure. So I started out studying teams under extreme stress, air crews, air traffic controllers, and nurses, and ended up launching corporate universities for AT&T around the world. And that's where I met my wife in a romantic semiconductor factory in Orlando. And did lots of HR technology work before moving to Motorola, where I ran Six Sigma globally. I was chief learning officer at Sutter Health, and most recently, before LeaderAmp, I worked for the founders of Infosys as an expat in India, where I created a model for coaching that helped 86% of senior leaders grow. At the same time, there were a bunch of gaps, and those gaps are what I try to solve with my company, LeaderAmp.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about LeaderAmp. I like the idea of mobile. It's obviously been a topic here on the podcast that we've talked about quite a bit, but we haven't ever talked about mobile in the context of learning and development. So let's talk about artificially enhanced mobile leadership coach. What is that, and what does it do exactly?
Sure. It basically mimics what I would do if I were coaching them personally. In the past, my team and I would coach leaders, but that model doesn't scale. I couldn't do it for mid-managers and junior people, and I wasn't with leaders all the time. So the smartphone app assesses people in 15 areas of the latest science. As soon as they're done, they can schedule which days they want to practice those things. We know in development that people have to practice things for more than 10,000 hours to become really good at anything, not just leadership. And the idea is they schedule which mornings they want to get a push notification. These are little tweets about self-reflection, about things they should practice, support they might want to get from somebody around them. They practice it as part of their normal daily routine, and in the evening, they schedule a second push notification where they do a journal entry capturing the lessons they've learned. Most of our clients like to use Siri just to speak into it. And that provides a very unique window into what they're up to. I never would know in the past when I would coach a senior leader whether they were practicing the things we talked about and they promised to do. Here I can see, are the individuals practicing the things? Are they really taking it seriously? Can I redirect them? And people have mobile phones all the time. They're not always at their computer. They can't always do e-learning, but they can practice on the job all the time. So the artificially intelligent expert system captures the essence of where they are, helps them pick a goal, and helps them practice, as well as remeasuring how they're doing each quarter. In a nutshell, it can complement or replace regular individual or group coaching.
I like the idea of holding people accountable, and I think the push notification is a great way to do that, just because we always have our phones, whether we like it or not, around us, and they go with us everywhere. So now you have your phone or your smartwatch or whatever it may be that's sending you a push to remind you to do these activities. And then I love this idea of using Siri, because it is such a simple way, and I tend, obviously I like audio doing the podcast, but I tend to send myself notes and text messages to send reminders for being able to complete things.
That's right. And most of us, at least I'll speak for myself, I have fat fingers. So just pushing Siri and just thinking and speaking into it is just a little bit more natural. And we know there's good science that say that process of forcing you to deepen your self-reflection itself is developmental. Uniquely, we have a GUI that shows what the automated coaching recommended and what your journal entry was. So you can look at that whole history, and that itself augments traditional coaching. So you can kind of see how you've been progressing. The other unique part about our system is that in the past, most companies have a small army of secretaries to remind people to complete 360-degree surveys. These are surveys that ask stakeholders about your leadership. We actually think that's backwards. We actually have the leader proactively talk to the stakeholders and then use the smartphone to nominate and remind them and push a button when they have at least 3 people to create a survey. This way, regardless of where they are, they can make sure that their stakeholders are actually giving them good feedback and then supporting their on-the-job development in a way that they couldn't do without the mobile.
Let's talk a little bit more about the technology, because one of my frustrations as a executive and as a consultant, especially in the tech or the digital space, is the hesitancy or the uninterest to adopt, social media or understand blogging or different pieces of types of tech. How are you encountering resistance in the boardroom, or how have people responded to being able to use their mobile phones in this way?
Well, companies like Harley-Davidson are very excited at the boardroom level about detecting risk in whether people are actually practicing what they're supposed to do to grow well before it's too late. When I was at Infosys, I could only do this once a year. It was a fairly manual reassessment process. At LeaderAmp, we give our clients every week. We don't give people insight into the personal details of the journals of leaders, but we can give the corporation visibility to whether their cadre of leaders are actually practicing, whether they're actually managing their stakeholders properly, and they can intervene, celebrate the ones who are doing a great job with it, and kind of help people get back on the wagon if they drop the ball well before the end of the quarter when it's too late, when we remeasure them. So in that sense, we've gotten good support from our early customers around accountability, as you said, but also the on-the-job support. Even with the best one-on-one coach, they can't be with you every day. They can't be with you twice a week even to give you suggestions about what you should practice. And we know they have to practice on the job. So we've gotten a lot of support for mass personalization. If you think of senior board level people, especially in the big companies like I've worked for, there's just no way to scale behavior change, especially transformations. We can literally clone some of the best leaders who are famous. Like at Infosys, the founders of Infosys were very famous. With LeaderAmp, I can now work with them to clone their best advice and mass personalize it to literally hundreds of thousands of people in multiple countries, multiple time zones. And this is not as threatening maybe as social media, because most people don't find development threatening the way they would performance reviews or legal liabilities in the press, if that makes sense.
I like this. It's scaling leadership and development, which is definitely something that organizational leaders are thinking about as we're in this hot job market. The boomers are considering or already starting to maybe move on to their next career or are looking at retirement. So we really need to find a way to engage, build, and help grow our current workforce.
That's right. And I don't want to oversell this, Jessica. We don't think this is for everyone. If you're not really serious about your career development, maybe you're at the end of your career or you've already decided you want to switch careers, this system might feel like spam to you. But for the people who are really eager for career advancement and they really want to take their development seriously, there's nothing like this that could actually embed it into their daily practice.
Well, let's take a little bit of a reset here. This is Jessica Miller-Merrill, and you're listening to the Workology podcast powered by Blogging for Jobs. Today we're talking with Matt Barney. He's an organizational psychologist, and he has a new mobile tool to enhance leadership coaching. And it's a mobile tool, which I love. And you can follow him on Twitter at LeaderAmp. So it's just twitter.com/LeaderAmp. to learn more and talk with him about all the kind of cool stuff that he's working on. Let's talk about a little bit more about LeaderAmp. Can you give us maybe a real world example of how this has been applied with some of the companies or high potential leaders that you've been working with?
So we're very proud of Swaroop Kumar, who's a graduate student, and used our assessments to make the decision to grow his own grit. Grit is a very exciting new area of leadership that is the passion and perseverance for long-term goals. And it turns out that the early studies show it outpredicts intelligence tests on the leaders that make it through successfully West Point Military Academy. Now, Swaroop was unusual. He decided to practice every single day, and when he did the initial self-assessment, he was at the apprentice level, and that's below sort of the middle level. He decided to practice every single day. Now, we expect people to practice at least once a week. He practiced 7 days a week, in addition to group coaching once a week, and in addition to a private LinkedIn community we provided his group. He learned things like reflecting on times when he was gritty in the past to fuel him past painful moments of his day. He learned techniques like one called WOOP, which stands for wish, outcome, obstacle, and plan, WOOP, to help him strategize ways to stay gritty throughout his day. And he was so diligent that we were very pleased to see he grew tremendously. We normally only expect people each quarter to move maybe one level at the most. So we expected him to move from apprentice to capable. But he was so diligent in practicing, he actually grew 4 levels to the level of expert in grit, which is not the highest level, but that's a huge improvement in just 1 quarter. We don't expect him to be representative of every leader, but it gives you a flavor for what's possible when people take it very seriously.
Well, you mentioned beginner to expert. How do you measure the individual growth of maybe somebody who is using grit or focused on that or other areas?
I'm glad you asked. This is one thing that makes us special. One of my research areas is in this measurement, making sure it's just like thermometers and rulers. And that's not traditionally true for human resources. We actually calibrate every single person, the self-assessments and the 360-degree survey participants, to make sure we remove severity and leniency bias, but when we measure them at the baseline and each quarter. So these are computer adaptive assessments. These are the same things the listeners have taken when they tried to get into college or graduate school with the SAT or GREs or the GMAT for business school. It's the same thing that's used to certify physicians, but we do it purely in leadership, and uniquely, we control for the fact that people sometimes are very lenient raters and others are very severe, and we remove that to make sure it's fair and accurate. So once a quarter, we put people through self-assessments and 360s only on the areas they've decided to improve, so that they're very, very short and precise. And we only baseline them holistically once a year and remeasure them in the areas they're working on once a quarter with computer adaptive assessments.
I'm a big proponent of frontline manager training, retention, and development.
Yes.
Do you guys have any plans to expand on LeaderAmp so that it's looking at maybe not just high potential or executive leaders, but also the frontline managers?
Absolutely. We support that today. Everything I'm telling you is customizable. So the platform is content agnostic. Even though I've been dealing with very senior and high potentials in my recent past, the platform can handle any content. And the weekly group coaching that many of our clients prefer is easier to customize than the artificially intelligent coaching, which takes more work. So one of our goals is to be able to scale this kind of mass personalized coaching to the frontline and even individual contributors who aren't, there's a lot more of them than frontline managers, sometimes in a framework we're calling the adventure race. So my co-founder, Andrea Herduzzo, she is an adventure racer, which is something like a triathlon, but in the mountains and with teams. That same metaphor we've used with several clients, and we haven't begun this yet, but to frame it for frontline managers and individual contributors around action learning projects so that it's real and that there is a lot of day-to-day engagement of people where the technology highlights and celebrates which individuals are practicing brilliantly, managing their stakeholders brilliantly. And those frontline managers and their supervisors can learn this every week in a report we give them. And every quarter, they can have little rewards and recognitions for people that grow brilliantly or were good team members to support each other in the collaborative LinkedIn group that we use. So this absolutely can be used for frontline managers today with a little bit of tweaking of the group coaching.
I love that you're using gamification elements to be able to keep people engaged and excited and wanting to learn and grow.
Absolutely. This is fun stuff, but the technology makes it easy to celebrate and recognize and then also embarrass people who are a little bit falling off the wagon. That's what's so difficult when you have teams across time zones, and I think that's crucial to scaling frontline managers because they tend to be all over the place in a multinational.
That sounds like a blog post. How to manage teams or how to develop teams across time zones.
Absolutely.
Matt, you're a psychologist. Can you give us any help or tips for helping leaders and their lawyers, maybe making them more comfortable with technology in the workplace? How can we get them to kind of round that corner and maybe start using your technology and then others that are helping engage and develop and retain our current workforce and future workforce?
Absolutely. I actually think technology is part of the solution to scratching two itches that both leaders and lawyers have. Leaders want to bring the future to the present. They want to scale the vision. They want to make sure every individual on their team and in their organization is behaving in a synchronous way toward shared objectives. And I think this idea of mass personalizing on individuals' mobile devices helps make that practical. And it's not unique to LeaderAmp. It's just we're one special case of doing it. We also give unique, transparent visibility to where people are doing a brilliant job with this. They're staying on course, changing their behaviors, and where they're not. So managers and leaders know where they can go influence more, celebrate more, and especially in transformational changes. So I think we give a unique window without violating people's personal privacy. We never share people's personal journal entries. We just tell the leaders who's doing a great job, who's fallen off the wagon and aren't doing anything, and who's growing and who's not. For the lawyers want to make sure things are fair, transparent, and defensible. Now, one of the ways we made sure we did that at LeaderAmp is there are several laws in the United States, like Title VII of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, Americans with Disabilities Act, Age Discrimination of Employment Act of 1991. They all basically say you got to be fair and you can't bias anything you're doing against any particular group. And we validated our instruments with 2,000 people in 15 different countries, and we threw away hundreds of questions on our assessments where women or men saw things differently or different cultures saw things differently. So it's very, very fair. And that's the kind of stuff lawyers really care about. Lawyers also care about fair treatment and giving people an equal shake, irrespective of some irrelevant demographic. And that's another thing. Technology doesn't have bad days or oopses the way we humans sometimes do. And so we can scale that fairness and track it and show that people are being treated fairly and that they're systematically able to benefit from the technology. So I don't think it's a panacea, but I think it's a step in the right direction for both lawyers and leaders.
Matt, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
LeaderAmp, leaderamp.com is our website. And as you said, our Twitter feed is a good spot to keep track of us.
Well, thank you, Matt, and thank you for listening today on the Workology podcast, where we discuss the art and science of the workplace, HR, and recruitment. This is Jessica Miller-Merrill, and until next time, you can visit Blogging for Jobs to listen to all our previous Workology podcast episodes.
Production services for the Workology podcast with Jessica Miller-Merrill provided by Total Picture Media.